G'day mates from Australia, and welcome to the weekly docket.
Hey guys, and good evening. Make sure everything's working. And since Mrs. Southern-in-law put some of these decorations here, I wanted to start off with the bigger screen. The Christmas tree is put safely out of reach in case I flail around, and this candle is not live. So safety audit is passed. Let's, look at that. Let's see, some more stickers have arrived. Again, they're not the best stickers in the world, but they are free. And when they're all gone, I'll make a version 2. So let's see if I can bring up what in the world is going on. Let's check it out. And I did see, I know I was seeing some locations earlier. New York, probably cooler than here because it warmed up around Raleighwood. All right, let's get into it and see what's happening. We're going to get in our virtual private jet, take a journey around the country and see what's happening in cases. Some of these we won't stay very long. We'll wear out our welcome, and some of them we'll take a closer look. So let's head out to Idaho and Bryan Kohberger in his case. Now notice for this picture, I've been trying to use a medium picture of him. I used to use the creepier one. I also don't want to get one that looks like he's just out of church. So I'm trying to pick one that's in the middle so that the judge won't be upset. And hello to Santa Fe. That is so cool. All right. Judge continues his. Oh, did this thing. What's going on with this? Maybe my router needs to be rebooted. Sorry if that messed up. Anyway, the judge has the DNA information about the family that's been submitted to the judge for in-camera review, which is what the judge requested to do, so the judge can see what the defense gets and make sure that there's nothing in there that's going to put people who really have nothing to do with the case in the spotlight at any point down the line. And that was, I think, a solution that satisfied, for the most part, the defense and the state. So good job on the judge's part. He'll take a look at what the state gives him. And if it's not violating somebody's privacy concern, not related to the case, he's going to hand it on over. So that's awesome. And hello, what's going on here? This is the weirdest thing, man. Is this working? I don't know. It says it is. I'm sorry. I'm tapping the comments and it's not bringing them up. So I don't know. I'm going to carry on as if it's working. I was trying to bring up where you guys are from, UK and Pennsylvania. So let's see. Something's been going on with StreamYard lately. Maybe it's the deep state hacking me. Tim Ferriter, as you know, he doesn't want to go into jail or stay there. And he tried to get out before sentencing. And check and see if it's going to do anything now. It might. Present. It's pretending like it's letting me do something. You'll have to tell me if that's on.
That's where it's at. Nope, you're on.
So am I back or not?
You're on.
All right, thank you. Mrs. Southern-in-law is telling me that it's back. I think we may need some router work here because we're supposed to have real internet, and it did this on Friday as well. So we'll see what happens. Thanks for everybody who's stayed in the game. And I'll, the deep state threw me out when I started talking about Kohberger. Let's get back to Judge. And I think that's where we cut off. And his reasonable position that he will examine the family genealogical DNA material that was provided by the state. He'll look at that, make sure there's no privacy concerns for people who don't have anything to do with the case, turn the rest over to the defense if anything is redacted. And I think that satisfies, for the moment at least, both sides of the case. So he's doing a great job. All right. So let's see if we can make it to the next case. And I was talking about Tim Ferriter, I think, when this thing exploded. And boxcar salesman, as you know, he wants to stay out of prison, jail. He tried to argue that before sentencing. And the judge said, no, I think we're good. And now he wants to be out while his appeal is pending, I think is what he's trying to do. And he said he had 2 job offers, and one of them was from the Mazda dealership. And the Mazda dealership stepped in and dunked on him and said, this guy hasn't applied here, has no job offer. So what's going on? Who made that fake letter? And certainly Tim Ferriter knows he didn't apply at this Mazda place, right? So I know his lawyer said that they alerted the court as soon as they found out that this was fake, and I do believe them on that. But somebody created it, and certainly he knew he wasn't doing that. So this is one shifty dude right here, isn't it? Let's hit this because I don't have an Adelson slide, but I'm going to pop this in here at least while I believe that I'm still on the internet. And Judy's interviewing criminal defense lawyer Chuck Collins tomorrow at 3 p.m. And so if you want some deep dives onto the Adelson situation, she's been doing that, of course. She was actually there, and she continues to discuss the case from her own insight, as well as with people who have been or are heavily involved in that matter as it continues to unfold, with Donna missing out on her travel plans to Vietnam to spend some time thinking about life in the custody of law enforcement in Florida. So, all right, I think we're still going. And crazed in Arizona. Look at this picture of Lori Vallow. She's just looking pretty strange there, the kind of person maybe who would do the sorts of things that she's accused of, or actually was convicted of. But, she sounded, when she talked to the judge, very upbeat. Hey, judge, I got one lawyer. Am I going to get more lawyers? And the judge said, well, not right now. And she's very understanding with that. So as she becomes more familiar with the system, she's able to deal with it directly. So, and we'll see what happens to her in Arizona. But there's something seriously wrong with this woman, and there's some evil in her, and she's where she needs to be, which is in custody. Somebody said they read that Tim Ferriter's trying to get bond. Yeah. So I think the status of his case is that he's filing an appeal. And he wants to be let out while he's on appeal. That's rare. And to support it, he was going to be a productive member of society. Look at these job offers. And I don't know about the other one, but one was from Mazda, and Mazda said the whole thing is fake. So I don't see him being any more successful in getting out of the box now than he has been so far in this case. So, yeah. Well, now this is interesting. Judy says that Donna Adelson was reported to be naked in jail singing to herself at age 73. Is that just something she likes to do? Or has jail affected her behavior? Yeah, I don't know about that. That's interesting. We've seen people try and play bonkers and stuff, but in the end, it doesn't help you a whole lot, because if you're not competent to stand trial, then you're just going to be held and treated until you become such. It's not some free ticket. Somebody says they're in Florida, and there's a company that never employed Ferriter, but they're getting slammed by misinformation, etc. Right. Which, no company deserves that anyway, of course, I think. He's the one responsible for what he did, and maybe perhaps his wife too, we'll say. All right. And we'll hit Juicy here in a little bit. I've got several slides on here that aren't in the description. Down in South Carolina, if we flip the jet around and come back this way, move against the sun on the way back to the east. We see Alex Murdaugh in this picture here. And did you watch his speech that he made after the victims gave their statements against him? And I will say that I could hear him a little bit in the background when people were speaking against him, and I could hear him say, that he understood and he was accepting what they were saying. So that's reasonable. I mean, not that I'm saying I believe he's sincere, but his conduct there was reasonable. But then he gets up and he starts making a speech, and it went on so long, I finally just turned it off. I never heard what he said at the end. It was too much. Let's all blame drugs, and kids don't do drugs because then you'll steal $20 million from people, and then you'll get blamed for murders you didn't commit. And after a while, I let it go. I think he was given 20 some years of a sentence for these financial crimes, and he served half of that during his speech. In Indiana, we've got, of course, the Allen case. I looked at the documents as they came out, the writs of mandamus to the Supreme Court, and that's all done now. There shouldn't be anything left to do. The Supreme Court allowed Allen's team to file responses in both of those cases, and that was discretionary on their part. They did it. Those responses are filed, so all the documents are in, and it's up to the Supreme Court. Both sides have technical arguments to consider. Obviously, the judge and the AG saying that Allen's team do not meet the requirements for a writ and that the writ isn't appropriate, and then Allen's team saying that all the information was either presented at the trial court level or it was impossible to really do so because of the judge's actions, and that a writ is the right place to consider this. And we've gone over all the quibbles on the arguments, and now it's just when these judges get together, decide what they're going to do and issue a written opinion. That ought to happen pretty fast. Let's see. All right. Yeah, Alex was so woe is me. Please be my friend. Come see me in jail. I'm so sorry I did this. And this was interesting, too, I thought, before I slammed it off. I had heard some of this, the comment here that Mark Tinsley knows that he has that money, and that's why I hate to bring up the drugs again. And that's possible. I mean, some or a substantial amount of that money could be somewhere. It's also possible that it isn't, right? But I tend to think some of it is somewhere. I would agree with Tinsley about that. And Tinsley's pretty sharp, and he's not going to give up on it easily. As you say, Tinsley wants that money. Tinsley wants that money on behalf of his clients, of course. And, he's a bulldog lawyer, so he'll go after it. Now, Murdaugh, may have put that somewhere where it's very hard to trace or get at or things like that. Why was Timmy given such a light sentence? I definitely think that what the son said played into that, right? I think that the son asking for mercy and such was probably a factor for the judge to downward depart. That's my opinion. So anyway, back on the Allen case again, we'll see the Supreme Court's decision soon, and I know there are some people that if they don't give Allen what he wants, they've already decided that the Supreme Court are Odinists who are crooked and supporting a crooked judge, and there are people who decided that if they do give Allen what he wants, it's totally unfair, rips the legal system apart, and soft on crime and all that. And my only advice on this would be to simply read what they write and try to understand it before forming an opinion of whether they're corrupt or not, because there's a lot of assumption about corruption going on, not just in this case, but everywhere. And it can be an easy shortcut to, well, I don't want to think or understand this thing, so I'll just decide if somebody disagrees with me, they have improper motives. For example, in the Maya case, when I did the stream on that, I had somebody let me know that the only reason that I came to the opinion that Maya's case got stronger as it went longer and that the hospital side looked bad was because of the awesome amount of money that I get off of YouTube. I have no integrity because I'm trying to monetize the channel and collect the big bucks, which can amount to either zero if you let the video stay non-monetized for a lengthy period of time, or sometimes $3 to $5. So I'm an easy sellout. So again, I encourage people to judge corruption on the facts and not simply because somebody disagrees with what your position is. Ferriter's child is still afraid of him. I see that. I'm not going to say that's wrong, but I think the teen was earnest in what he was saying. So I do think that. At any rate, I did hear Ferriter's attorney say in terms of whether there was a regret there that he didn't take the plea bargain, that he got much less than what the state wanted. Yeah, but he also got a lot more than the plea bargain. But I think, or at least I heard, that the plea bargain was in association with the concept that his wife would also plead guilty. So to cut him a break, he maybe didn't want to do that if he thought it necessarily meant his wife would go to prison. Whatever his motives were for turning down the deal, it didn't work out for him, because what he got sentenced to was still substantially more than what the plea bargain would have been. So it didn't really work out for him. And that's good. I think he doesn't get it. And the fact that it went to a jury, I think, is good, because this wasn't a deal forced on him by a corrupt state and all that. He was convicted. So I think that's good. So hello to Indiana. I missed all the hellos as the deep state was kicking me off the stream earlier. It's interesting that it held the stream open long enough for this thing to reboot. I'll do some technical work here on that end. How about Franke here, Ruby Franke, the YouTuber who did have a big channel and made money on it, talking about her life and her kids and things like that. Yes, things continue to not look so good for her. But, you see it. Here's a picture of her and her husband together. And, if you see somebody on Facebook or the internet and they're super happy like that, that has to be the true state of things, right? People never give a false impression of what their life is really like on the internet when they're showing you how great they have it, right? So maybe this just deteriorated rapidly at the last moment of their marriage. But he has decided the thrill is gone, and he is getting a divorce. And that raises the question, can I get a witness? What does this do to his potential testimony against his wife in the criminal matters, or potentially civil matters? And I heard one attorney say it correctly on TV, and I heard another attorney say something I think is wrong. So I'm going to show you what I found, and you'll have a third option there. But what I will do here is show you why I'm thinking what I'm thinking, so you can make your own judgment. It's been a privilege. So in Utah, they have a privilege which you'll find in, pretty much all over the country, which is some kind of privilege involving a spouse. And in Utah, it's essentially a tiered approach. And there's marital privilege and confidential communications privilege between spouses. And those are not the same thing. The marital privilege is based out of the Utah Constitution, and it involves criminal cases. If you get divorced, it doesn't apply anymore. And the privilege belongs to the spouse called to testify. Here it is enshrined in their rule, where it says, in a criminal proceeding, a wife may not be compelled to testify against her husband, nor a husband against his wife. So the privilege is the person being called to testify. And it's not even just about communications. It's the privilege to not have to testify against your spouse in a criminal matter. But if you decide you want to do it, okay, if you want to testify against your spouse, you can do it. That this privilege does not belong to the person accused. In this situation, it belongs to the person who's being asked to testify. So that brings us to the second part. So again, when they get divorced, this is gone, but it wouldn't have kept the husband from testifying anyway if he wanted to, although his attorney says he doesn't think he knows anything that would really matter for this. So what's the spousal communications privilege? And the odds of me being able to read that on this screen are pretty low. Let me bring it up down here where I can get to it, read it. Because that's the broader privilege and the one I think most people are thinking about. So this is a privilege during the person's life to refuse to testify or to prevent his or her spouse or former spouse from testifying as to any confidential communication made by the individual to the spouse during their marriage. Okay, so in this case, either party can say, I'm not going to do it. All right, and so you really need both of them being willing to do it. And it also covers after divorce. So this is pretty broad, but it is about confidential communications. However, it has some epic, gigantic exceptions. And the exceptions include spouses as adverse parties in a civil proceeding, furtherance of a crime or tort. So if the communication was made in whole or in part to enable or aid anyone to commit or plan to commit or conceal a crime or tort, this privilege doesn't apply. The spouse is charged with a crime or tort in a proceeding in which one spouse is charged with a crime or tort against the person or property of the other spouse, the child of either spouse, person residing in the household, and crime against the third person if it involves any of these above people. So if this is child abuse against their own children, as you can see, the privilege wouldn't apply anyway. So there wouldn't be this communications privilege that she could assert because it's accepted to that. And so if he stayed married, there would potentially be the marital privilege that he could choose or not. So his decision to get a divorce, it impacts this only to a limited degree because he could have testified anyway. But however, the fact that he's getting divorced, I think his lawyer said on the Law and Crime that, well, if they call him to testify, I guess I'll have to go testify. And that is a nice short way to put this. So, but here's the law on it in case you want to look at it later. There it is. It's Rule 502 of the evidence rules that show what the limits of the privilege are. So this rule is meant to encapsulate the marital privilege as it's enshrined in their constitution in Utah, as well as this spousal communications privilege, which is of a different scope. Oops. Go back up in here. So that's Ruby Franke. Now let's talk about law enforcement side a little bit, because often there's the concern that you can do anything if you're on the law enforcement side. When are you ever held accountable? And obviously that's rare. There is a level of immunity that these officials have. But in the Ahmaud Arbery case, as you probably know, the former district attorney Jackie Johnson is facing trial for felony violation of oath of office and misdemeanor obstructing law enforcement investigation. And this has to do with her communications with one of the defendants there was involved in the shooting that happened apparently directly after the shooting. And many times after that, the state saying that she impeded the police from arresting this person and investigating properly. So she's facing these charges. She asked for them to be dismissed. The judge said, I don't think so. But because we live in a simulation, I think it's interesting that one of her attorneys is the same attorney who's representing Young Thug, whose picture is also up there. So they got something in common now, as she's seeing life from the defense side of the table. And I don't know if you've watched much of that case or not, but I thought it was entertaining because attorneys should be able to be creative, especially if they got to go to court, and they are. And in that case, they let the court know that Thug, it's not pejorative. That doesn't mean what you think it means. It's somebody on the street acting in some kind of bad way or whatever. Thug is merely an acronym for, I think they said it was truly humble under God. Am I making that up? I may have got the T word wrong, but I think they did say that's what it stood for, more or less. Truly humble under God. That's what Thug stands for. So come on, guys. That's some good lawyering there. You gotta enjoy that, I think. All right. So that's what's going on there. A district attorney actually facing charges in the defense mode at current. Here's one that wasn't on the list either, Alex Jones. And I say sometimes, especially if we're talking about civil cases, that it's a long way from getting a judgment to getting a check. Started saying that back during the Amber Heard Johnny Depp case, with a lot of speculation of how collection works after you get a judgment, and what happens if there's an appeal, and how do you get to somebody's money, and what if they live in a different state, and what if it's overseas, and what if it's in a trust? Yeah, that's all complicated, and there are attorneys and accountants who specialize in protecting assets from collection efforts and try to make you judgment proof. And Alex Jones certainly had a team who was generating some of those results. So remember, he got what I think the headline here that I clipped said about $1.5 billion of judgments against him. And the plaintiffs have offered to settle for $85 million over 10 years. So $8.5 million a year. Plus, if you make anything more than $9 million, then we would get half of that. So basically $85 million is what they'll take to settle a $1.5 billion judgment. I don't know how Alex Jones is doing right now with the show and everything. That might be something he can actually afford to pay over time, although I don't think he's accepting this offer currently. But it's a long way from $1.5 billion down to $85 million, right? So if that doesn't do anything else, it tells you that what a judgment's worth is not what the number is printed on it. It can take a lot of time and effort to try and secure that, and the person has to have the assets. So it's something to keep in mind as you see some gigantic verdicts get levied out there. Of course, it's a reminder in Alex Jones' case that the judges in two cases, at least two major ones, sanctioned Jones, saying his side had engaged in discovery violations and repeated, because you wouldn't go to the nuclear option right away, to the extent that the judges struck the answer, and then which that admits liability on Jones's part, and then it became a damages case. A lot of people feel like the judges were unfair in that regard, but it is an option they have as long as the behavior warrants it. And whether you find out how to find out if the behavior warrants it is you have to look at what level of violations there were and court orders before that. Because if a judge oversteps there and gives too hard of a sanction too early, that is subject to being reversed on appeal. And obviously then, the judgment would be out because they never did a trial on liability. So it doesn't exactly flow, say, to the Allen case where the judge did the nuclear option of removing the attorneys off the case, but it is the normal practice that sanctions increase in severity. You don't just start out with the nuclear option. So I'm no expert on what happened to discovery in the Jones case to say exactly whether the judge was in an area of discretion or not, but that's how that happened. A story so dumb that only mainstream media would push it. Juic, however he decides to say his name, I don't know that I would trust him on how he says his name because he just lies about everything. So there may be an actual way to pronounce it that he's never told anybody, because this guy seems to be allergic to the truth. And after his made-up story was discovered, and it was ridiculous on its face. It was absolutely absurd and ridiculous, and but it was fodder for MSM. They loved it. People who love their own narratives loved it, as people do. And then, of course, many other people said this is crap, which turned out to be correct. And now the Court of Appeals, I guess in a divided decision, because one of the judges, I think, said that he'd already had a punishment. Okay, so that's not saying he didn't deserve one, but he had some deal or whatever. But anyway, the majority decision said, we sustain these convictions and you got to go to jail for, I think it's a 150-day sentence, and he served 6 days of it. So his attorneys say, well, take this all the way to the state Supreme Court. And he is saying, or at least some of his representatives are, that he's the victim of a racist system. And you could be, right? But is this the guy right here to believe about that? Okay, the guy who made up the racist incident, which is why he was charged in the first place. I don't know that he's the poster person for reform in the system when he's crooked, okay, and made up things based on stereotypes to advance his personal cause. So I don't believe that. I don't believe it's racist that if you make up something, have people investigated, divert law enforcement resources and things like that, lie to the police, that you pay some kind of price for it. So that's my opinion, but you can see, I'm sure I'd be accused of only thinking that because of the color of my skin. I put him right here next to the dumb criminal section because when I first put this in there, I put it on the other side of it. But I have two cases that I'll show for that to get away from the murder and the giant judgments and things like that we go through, and get over to something that's a little slightly lighter. Let's see what these two cases are. You are so dumb. Yeah, yes. Now remember this case in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, Cajun country. We'll leave a light on for you at the hotel. And this young gentleman here, Mitchell DeSlat, whatever, he didn't need his sleep number that night as he pulled off the side of the road and decided, I've been out drinking. I think what I need to do is get a hotel room and just sleep this off. And the decision to drive, of course, drunk, it's a bad one. That's bad. But why not stop what you're doing wrong and say, you know what, I'm going to do the responsible thing and get off of the road and get into a hotel and just go to sleep. Okay, that's the right thing to do. So he pulls into this hotel. You can see it on the picture at the bottom of the screen there. And it's secure. That's a good idea. You don't want to just let anybody in. And he hits the buzzer and they say, can we help you? And he says, yes. And they let him in. And he asks, which hotel is this? And they say, this is the State Trooper Barracks, Troop A. And he was obviously intoxicated and drove there. And so sadly, this was not a hotel, but it was he drove himself to the state trooper's office where he was booked for DUI. But I think the good news is out of that is I'm sure he did get a room to sleep in after that. And while it was free for that night, it probably ended up being more expensive than if he had found something with a neon light on the outside of it. Always look for that neon light and the vacancy. But this does look a little bit like it might be, something. A Hampton, maybe a low-level Hampton, I don't know. But it didn't work out for this poor guy. But in the end, it kind of did. He got to sleep, and he was off the streets, and But it just goes to show, be careful out there, even when you're trying to correct your bad acts. Now here we're going to head overseas, and we don't often, well, we don't really ever do that, but we've got extra tanks on the jet so we can make it across the ocean and see what's going on in Scotland, because this state that I'm in, North Carolina, has a heavy Scottish influence. And if you watch Outlander, which I have done with my wife, who loves every aspect of it, then you will see it starts in Scotland and it comes to North Carolina, because that's the trajectory of the story. But it's based in history, because so many Scots did come here and influence the state all the way from the coast to the Blue Ridge Mountains, Blue Ridge and the Smoky Mountains, where they influenced not only the culture of how people live, but the music that developed and all of that. And there's a Scotland County here. Down at the bottom, you see the Highland Games at Grandfather Mountain, where they do, I don't know why they do it, but apparently in Scotland, people like to take telephone poles and throw them. And that's interesting, okay? You know, I grew up way out in the country, so we would use sticks and things as toys and stuff growing up, and yet I don't think it ever evolved to throwing telephone poles through the air, which is pretty impressive. But they do that here to honor their heritage. And then even here in Raleigh, I saw, when I looked at it, the Raleigh Scottish Highland Dance Troupe. So they're all over the place here. So we're big fans of Scotland, and fans enough that I won't try and do their accent. I was doing it earlier. And let's see what's happening over there. Did they have miscreants in Scotland too? It's just America, the United States. They do. Let's take a look at this. Yes, thank you. I'm going back for this one. As opposed to cow tipping. So while I never actually saw anybody do that and can't really say whether it happens or not, I can say, as somebody who grew up with cows, okay, because we had cows and all that, that there was a lot of talk about that, but I never saw it. I mean, I wouldn't want to knock a cow over, so I never tried it, I have to say. But thank you for that point. So if we ever had the Redneck Highland Games, I think a cow tipping would have to be one of the things that are in there. Now, cow chip throwing at people, because the Scots seem to take heavy things and throw them, whether it's spinning some kind of stone or whatever and throwing it, or a telephone pole or whatever. They're just throwing things really hard. And, you know, they're doing all that stuff with their arms, and when they dance, they're mostly using their legs. So it's definitely different than the way we do it. But we would either have cow chip throwing, certainly, or cow tipping would certainly be as part of our type of games here. But not the Scots. They're more dignified than that. They throw telephone poles. So let's get back over to the criminals over there. Now, you know, the United States still has a little bit of its cowboy hat kind of, man, we're so violent over here, and we're so hard on criminals and stuff, and we're shooting each other all the time, and the harsh environment that we have here. And you see that a lot of people often criticize states who have 3 strikes and you're outlaw. You know, you do 3 serious crimes, you just go to jail for life. Like, forget it. We're tired of you getting out on the street and messing society up. And of course, that's been softened over the years, but and maybe that is too harsh and a little bit too much American baseball. But is 200 strikes and you're out for quite a while a bad thing? Maybe Scotland could consider, because this guy right here, David McGregor, recently, or at some point, told a court guard he would rip her face off if she didn't make him a cup of tea. But that's not why he's on this. That's rude, but that's not dumb. But what he did do was go into a house and rob it and swallow jewelry. I mean, why not? And eventually it comes out of your prison wallet, right? Well, unfortunately, he fell out the window, and I'm not sure if he was being chased by police at that point, but he might have been, suffered a serious injury. And they take him to the hospital, and he gets x-rays, and not only does it show whatever injury he has, but it shows the jewelry that he stole. So the police stayed on the case, and eventually his body testified against McGregor, as he eventually discharged the evidence into the waiting hands of police. And I would think whoever was there to collect that evidence was whoever was in the most trouble at that point in time in that department. So yeah, and here's a little picture of Scotland there. What a beautiful country here, and what a forgiving country, because this guy carried on. And in one article I saw, he had 186 charges, and that article was a while back, so I figure he's at 200 or better at this point. And the one little blurb there was when he tried to steal things, because he thought at that point he was invisible and nobody would see him do it. So this is somebody I'm sure has a substance abuse problem. But I think it's also true probably that when he's not high on whatever that is, he's not solving quantum mechanics equations or calculating orbital trajectories and engaging in orbital mechanics calculations either. I think his ideas range from bad during a good day to terrible whenever he's on whatever his drug of choice is. YouTube censored the word cow in a previous post. Well, that is bizarre. Now, see this? Here's somebody saying, I've been successful at bovine tipping. It's difficult to catch them asleep without spooking the others. Yeah, well, that's true. I'm sure that's true. And I never tipped one or seen it. I will say, again, growing up around cows and going through fields and stuff, because that's how we used to get to our friends, and trying to stay away from bulls and making sure you knew at all times which field they were in and you could get to the fence before the bull could get to you and all that, which was interesting to me when I was younger, was trying to sneak around Germany at night. And you could be as tactical as you wanted to be. This goes about your cows not sleeping soundly situation. The cows would hear it or see it or somehow sense it, and then they would want to come to where you are, I guess, because that's maybe they think you're going to feed them. The Germans maybe do that. And they put bells on them, and at least in the south of Germany, frequently enough that I heard it all the time. So you're trying to be super quiet. Everybody's talking with the little radios, and stuff. You don't even have a microphone, and goes to the bone and stuff. And then here comes this cowbell across the field. So it kind of blows the moment there of the situation. And then, let's see. It's hilarious. They wake in a panic. I'm taking all your word for that because, as I say, while I grew up in that environment, it wasn't something that I saw. So as long as they don't get hurt, I'm down with it. I like cows. I always liked them. They were always nice enough to me, and I stayed away from the ones that were mean. So we've made it through some cases with a big technical error here, and I appreciate everybody coming by. Let's see if we got any questions on the cases we covered. They weren't so deep as they sometimes are as we get around Christmas time or the holidays and getting a little break from some of the serious matters. They might think it's body shaming to talk about cow. Yeah, well, it's also, wow, let's just assume cows are fat, right? That's terrible. They're just big bone. They literally are just big bone. I mean, some of them could use to lose a few pounds, but they all kind of exercise. They walk around all the time. They got to move around fields and things like that. So we still have cows live next to us here. It's not us. It's the university where they do cow-based experiments. They train tomorrow's cow owners at North Carolina State University. So, all right. Well, that's it for now. And make sure I covered. Yeah, thank you. I love cows. And I do too. They generate good things for us and stuff. So I like them. They never gone out of their way to hurt me. I've eaten a few of them. They haven't seemed to hold that against me. So I can't be hostile toward them. Well, that's it for now. And everybody have a good weekend. Let's see if I can bring this up and generate this thing there we go. So we'll have a little celebration that the stream made it through. And I'll talk to you later. That's it. Thanks. Bye.